From a deep tech, India has today come to that layer in the infrastructure. What do we have? We have AI and sovereign compute. This is a very great initiative which is started by the government of India. It is under MIT, where all data center providers like us have to provide 1,000 odd GPUs to the government for AI, which is for the national, reserved for the national initiatives. We have also seen the usage of it in space and defense centers. So if you look lately, a lot of defense local manufacturing has started. All that computational and the fluid dynamics have happened onto the newer GPU servers. We already have the traditional science and genomics and the research which has been going on in the HPCs. And now you have got advanced manufacturing, which is around edge compute and DPI-led automation. A simple example of that is every automobile manufacturer, when you go out there, at least has automated through robots its all painting systems. You will find more than 60-65% of the automotive manufacturers, even that welding is getting done through the robot, so that you have a very consistent product which is coming out. What are we looking at? We are looking in the next 2 years at 1.4 gigawatt of data centers, also known as IT load. We are also looking by 2030 between 13 to 57 terawatt hours of consumed electricity. Again, because of sustainability, as said by Sir, we would request it more to be more renewable from green. We are sitting in Telangana. You will be pleased to know that in Telangana last year, the number of watt hours energy produced by the state that we are normally consuming, we were 41.2% renewable. So it's not that states are bad and we are only using fossil fuels. It's a myth that is being put into our mind. Because such sort of sun, you can compare now. You take the same solar, let us say all of us import solar from Mr. China. Cost is same. If we put that solar up in Europe, we get 110 days of sunshine. We put it in US, we get 160 to 170 days of sunshine. We put it in India, we have so many wasteland that we'll get 300 days of sunshine. So where is the ROI more? It is naturally India. You can't put it in Singapore, you can't put it in Hong Kong, because they don't have the space to put it. You put it in Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand. At that time, there is a lot more rainy days. You never cross 180 days. So our land is gifted, and that is why Sir was saying that maybe people are exploiting. But it leads to these renewable energy sources which will power that. Now, what is the investment that we are talking about? We are talking about somewhere between 1.8 to 2.25 lakh crore rupees will go into building the data centers in short period of time. And what is the impact of this going to have is overall 1.7 trillion. Now, how much of that manufacturing is in India? How much is outside? That time will stay. So now, looking purely, if I say that compute is the central of universe, what is happening? So the first thing which is happening is the capital formation. First of all, as my colleague was saying from there, first of all, you have to buy the GPU. You have to have the HPC clusters. You require those algorithms, those software to train. Next, you require very high bandwidth. For example, in our office LANs and all, we had 1 Gbps, 100 Mbps. We have heard some place of 10 Gbps. A GPU to GPU connectivity is at 800 gigabit per second. To connect in a supercluster, 1 GPU nodes of 64 nodes to another 64 nodes, you require 1.6 terabit of bandwidth. So that bandwidth is exploding. Then the technology is changing very fast. So earlier we bought a desktop or even the laptop today can last for 5 years. But that is not the case in GPU, because every 2 years it progresses by 4 or 8x the computing happens, increases. And therefore, your hardware cycles now start to go below. So you are looking at more and more refresh cycles. From a compute strategy perspective, they're very simple, right? When you have a sensitive workload, for example, sovereign workload, secret files, top secret files, intellectual property related, you would like to keep it on premises. You don't want that data to go out. From colocation side, you can use high density clusters. So let's say there is 1,000 GPU, 10,000 GPU available. You can put your workload there. But remember, when you use public infrastructure, you need to normalize your data first. Otherwise, whatever data that you put in, that AI will learn and tokenize that. Finally, you could also look at hybrid, saying yes, in every organization has some top secret data, some public restricted data. So maybe the public data, whatever it is, we can put it on the public side, reduce the cost, accelerate the systems. Whatever I have on the top secret side, I may as well look at that on an on-premises model. Next is the capital productivity. So how do you decide that after all this investment, what is the outcome going to be? So remember, in AI, there are distinct capacity tiers. There is a training system, there is a fine-tuning system, and there is an inference system. The speaker, just after the lunch, he was talking more from a training systems, right? But once we have base model, for example, we use same mathematical programs, same robotic arms motions for multiple industry use cases. So if you think simply like that, then mathematical formulas are building my large language models. And if there is a large language model already there, instead of creating it, if we look at a specific problem, our data sets required are smaller, time is smaller, and you can look at different areas. Simple example, let us say about gensets in data centers, right? So you could have Cummins, Kirloskars, all of them compared of 2 megawatt. Each of those data set will now be very small. A year of data will be hardly 1 terabyte, 10 terabyte, right? So you could take 10 manufacturers, you're talking about 80 terabit. 80 terabit is not such a challenge as a 80 petabyte data, because that model is already trained on that 80 petabyte data. You download and use that as whatever GPT.small or Cloud.small, and we can use that finite data for research. And then we also look at the resilience piece of it. So that is when I'm coming to the inference point. So remember, one is creating the LLM. Second is taking industrial problems, using fine-tuning to give the output. And the third is when you use it actually for resilience. So you are putting it to give an outcome out of it. That is when the third point comes in. What is the government doing? So this is where the government is subsidizing. So there is a national AI compute grid which is getting made. Today it's close to 24,000 GPUs. The total capacity decided for this is 80,000 GPUs. So this will be the sovereign GPU backbone. It is there in control-edge data centers. It is there in my peers data center like Yotta, NTT. You will find all data center providers providing it. They centrally allocate. So many GPUs are available. And then people go to MIT. And from there, they allocate the number of hours. And this is for large researches, the language models, etc., that they are making now. Then there is a requirement of university industry shared clusters, which was brought out just now. This is what we are trying to now bring in as part of a state policy. So states build up IT policy initially, then they build data center policy. Now for this co-creation, we are trying to talk to states to bring this policy into being so that individual institutes, because all the areas won't have same industries, And all the places, it will not be uniform problem to solve. That uniform problem is at national level. But given a state, a territory, for example, Hyderabad is famous for pharma, right? So there will be more research of pharma here. Somebody is very famous for manufacturing auto ancillary, maybe a Gurgaon side. So they may want to do more research on those problems, right? So that is the second. Third is industry-hosted sovereign environment. This is also where we have got a lot of input, where government is trying to protect public, private, all type of industries which contribute majorly to our economics. So they are putting a boundary to it, saying, no, this is large, you will have to have additional controls when you are dealing with these such industries. And finally, for startup and research enablement, this is the last part. This also will cover as part of policy and co-creation. So efforts of one, the national compute is already there. The university and the last part are getting developed as part of state directive. And in the second last, the industry-led, was already there. So we were giving GPUs to industries for their requirements, for example, for wind turbine and aircraft and CFD analysis, etc. There they are trying to put guardrails around the system. Is there from a research, the point that I said of research. So I'm not talking about a fresher academician. What I am thinking is like this. Today, let us say I have to make a campus of 500 megawatt. And I have been making campuses of, let's say, 5 megawatt. So I have to scale 100x. Today, when you look at our boardroom, we always go and talk to an industrialist or a provider who has done that scale. We never take that problem back to our academicians and say that if we have to scale by 100x, can you tell us what type of problems and issues will come? So this, in my mind, is what is the research-grade compute. So first is the strategic compute demand planning. We need to do that. We need to define the data. This is also very well now defined by the MIT. In fact, Government of India provided 5 data sets normalized to be used in any data centers for any kind of GPU. We have to select the right access model because this is now industrial data coming to you. So we have to also see where that data is being looked into. And finally, we have to plan the infrastructure dependencies. So in this era, what is it that as a research I am looking at? Remember, traditional, I was making 10 kilowatt per rack. One rack is 6 square feet only, 2 feet by 3 feet, or maximum 2 feet by 4 feet. We are talking an area of 6 to 8 square feet. If you divide that by 8, you get the heat density by square feet. So initially we were making 1 or 2 kilowatts per square feet. Then at hyperscale, when that cloud thing happened, minus 5 years, this suddenly increased 2.5x. But now if you see the scale is increasing by 8 or 10x. So that much electricity, electronics has to be there to supply. That much ambient cooling systems have to be there to move the heat out. And that is what is the engineering principles that I want to talk about. The high density architecture, the scalability, and then how do I handle the life cycle? I mean, will my system still work for 5 years? Do I have to change it in 3 years? Will they work for 10 years? There is a gray area out there. So let's now put up one by one research subjects. The GPUs work at 400, 800 gig at ultra low latency. There is no IP address they want. They can address each other bit byte. They have that protocol inbuilt. The research area that we want is how do you define the parameters of data movement efficiency? Because that will be the differentiator between an output of one GPU cluster of India compared to worldwide output. So if we end up somehow, because adding GPU does not increase the network. Network has now become a bottleneck. So if we put together a research paper to say, okay, these are the parameters. If we focus on these parameters, maybe it requires a separate ASIC chip design, a firmware, or a protocol. But we identify, we lay out that standard, and the data movement efficiency is one such research subject. Second research subject is the thermal constraint. Now that could be defined. So what is the difference between an Indian data center compared to the world data center will finally be what is the performance per watt you are getting. Because as a MNC, I can select any territory. I can go to Iceland, I can go to US, I can come to India, right? Now if I have to attract that, like GCC, those workloads to India, the second parameter here, when you go from density inflection to constraint shift, you will finally find a very simple parameter that will finally evaluate all of us, which is the performance by watt. And this includes your sustenance, electricity, everything put together. The third is how do you define your density ceiling? So where do you say no? So let's say this is the room. If I was at 10 kilowatt per rack, maybe this is 3000 square feet room, so it may take up 6000 kilowatt worth of IT load. The same room in cloud compute will scale 3x, so maybe we are talking 18 megawatts worth of IT load. Now same area can actually hold all the GPU also. So I can go as high as 110 megawatts to be supplied here. But then there has to be a density. There is always a trade-off, right, between what is the more efficient model and where it starts to become inefficient. So when you look at conventional air cooling, when you look at low floor, when you look at direct liquid cooling, or whether it is immersion cooling, the last two are coming in the world also. There are not many standards out there. If we help research to say this is the inflection point for each of this, and we develop systems, standards to define it, not only will it help industry to gather more or more share from the worldwide for this, but it will also prime our own students to help engage in the industry for this outcome. That's why I named all four, because all four are still there. Please remember, when I talk direct liquid cooling in servers, still 20% is being resolved by conventional air cooling. So none of the technology is end of life. But every technology has an inflection point, whereafter it starts to degrade in the performance or an output. So these are standards that we would request academia to help take it up. We are ready to fund, we can give you data, right? We have the real-time data available with us. So it's not that we are working on some imported data sets. Very original data we can give you, and this could be one research subject. The four pillars of this engineering or our growth will be renewable integration, the power efficiency, and one thing that I have not talked about is the water stewardship. And just to make you understand, that is one of the advantages of India. Let me talk about control-edge data centers Mumbai. It is around about 150 megawatt. We were consuming 15 lakh liters of potable water per day, and it was becoming costly. So there we did an experiment. There was a MLD plant which was treating sewage water and putting that water to Washi Creek. We found an old canal from there which came behind our data center. We put in our filtration equipment and we let go of this 15 lakh liters per day. And you would not believe that using those Western technologies purchased at import without any cost benefit also, in 8 months we broke even. So in India there is so much untreated water that can be rotated back secondary into the industry, which in water stewardship we are number one. We are not a Western nation where that river seen in Paris is also bathable, right? But we don't get those carbon credits because there they take those credits under their municipal laws or state laws or social welfare. And when you put those parameters directly onto us, we don't stand out. But if you, in fact, if only water stewardship was researched in India, where primary water, secondary water and tertiary water could be used, And somehow those standards included this treatment of water cost also borne by the state, and also is reusability. We would stand out in India because in India we have faced many droughts, sir. Each Indian understands the value of water, be it from Chennai, I have lived in Chennai, to UP, to Rajasthan, to Maharashtra. Each one of us understands the value of water. What is happening out there is, even though our investments are there in this water stewardship, but when you look at their standard, they take water as potable water. I am using dirty water, grey water, right? So they won't give me carbon. Actually, it's saving our cost, so my cost is becoming lower. So we require those helps here. The second thing around this is, let's say data center, I told you, come in clusters, right? So let us say we have got 10, 20 data centers. In that cluster, you are consuming 3,000, 3 gigawatts, 2 gigawatts of energy. The amount of water that is evaporating will be close to 100 million liters per day. We also need to do and study this science. Would it change the weather patterns, the rain patterns? Today we are ill affording or not able to afford those type of social studies. But all of that add here. Because if you look at Navi Mumbai, after Navi Mumbai became the data center, the flow of the rivers have increased by 2 months. It's not a scientific thing. It is something that I noticed because I live there. But scientifically proven, this is a recycling of water, because the water vapor then goes up towards the hill and you have more rains, right? So it's a sustainable ecosystem that you are creating. That is not measured out there. And it's not only about data center. Let's take all industries, let's take all our afforestation drives, and those are the parameters that will start to stand out, saying that what changes that we do in electrical, mechanical or compute, and how does it our environment. And that is where we can also start to become champions and allow people to understand what we are doing. So from a IEEE paper, and I quote, because control as success is on tier 4, and the tier 4 data center is based on one standard of electricity, which is IEEE 1394 of resilient electrical subsystems, where you have redundant service systems. We are ready to sponsor, or as an industry body will come across as part of policies. We want our institutes also to do research and publish these standards, or maybe contribute in those IEEE standards, because our geography, our environment is slightly different from the world out there. And those nuances don't get caught in the standard. So what happens if I have to take a fire system? I have no other system but to go by fire rating or a TVRA rating of Singapore. I don't have my own standard. If I have to take a DG set or a server, the noise standards are all made by Europeans. They will say 45 decibel, 90 decibel, I have to follow that. Maybe for us 110 decibel works, right? I don't know, but I don't find India conducive or specific standards or tweaking. This is nothing but 5% change. You're not asking 100% change. But what it helps as an industry is when we are importing equipment, and there is a comparison also to the Indian system or localization of that, we have some standard to refer to. We are not only talking experience. Today, we hire all experienced folks and they say, this will work, that will not work, this will work, that will. But not a very scientific way of dealing with things. A scientific way says, we have got more humidity, maybe in your area where you are, you have developed, that doesn't cross 40 degrees, we have got 30 days above 40 degrees, so we want ABC. So if those are tweaked, slowly they start to become our sovereign compliance. Just like our different languages and dialect, right? Those 6% changes that you bring in, sum total starts to bring the compliance to this land. And it also benefits the industry, because maybe earlier I was changing that system in 5 years. With your 5% tweaking, even if I can run it for 7 years, like mechanical internal chillers and all. It is an ROI increase of 23%. So would request the academia to also look at these small tweaks and participations. So I end my slides with what I am. So as controllers, we are the largest APAC rated 4 data center. Remember, rated 4 means very simple thing. Any downtime is a downtime. There is no planned downtime in our data center. And sooner we go down, we have penalties starting. Number 2, in a rated tier 4 data center, outside of downtime, concurrently maintainable systems, you also have something which is known as trust. Because we don't change systems. Customers keep on running for 10, 15 years. And that is why we have attracted the top of the companies worldwide. What are we known for? We are known for disrupting the business model of data center. So earlier a data center was sold by capacity. You want 10 kVA rack, you pay X amount per month. We changed that. We said you want 10 kVA, that means you are occupying 2 racks, gave us 16 square feet worth of rental, and whatever power you consume, we do a PUE based. So let's say I have done a PUE of 1.5 with you. If I poorly manage, I make a loss. If I manage it very good, 1.4, 1.35 incentivizes me to do innovation. And in India, this model has caught on. And the primary reason why large data centers are very, very restrictive to come to India is because they don't want to sign this PUE clause. So now you can understand the difference, 5% difference in that IEEE. We did it based on our hunch, but we find that after 18 years also, the largest data centers out there like Digital Reality, Equinix, these models have not come in. As part of Cloud4C, I have hired racks right from Equinix in Dubai to NTT in Japan. All those places you give power by kWh. Per month you give. It's only in India that we take up performance-based metrics. And as we grow to 7, 8 gigawatts, every data center in India has to adopt it because all the MNCs on the left side now know that model. And that is one of the reasons that we operationally we are 40% lesser than any worldwide. And if we get help from you, this will become a more sustainable model. Where is the Indian specs which are going out there? So I've only done it in electrical. I have not done it in mechanical. I have not done it in network. I have not done it in software. I have not done it in firmware. All those areas are open. Right? A very simple example from an architecture point of view. A tier 4 says N+1 whole into 2. So I have got 2 GIS substations, each supported by full DG banks, all of them charging a UPS which has 3 battery banks. Because I am afraid of that sinusoidal wave which is coming out to go into the sensitive workload. So every UPS has got 1 battery bank which is discharging, 1 which is charging, and 1 which is fully charged. This much redundancy overhead to us. Let's think a simple thing. We bring in rectifiers, we change internally to DC, right? And you give us some technology whereby whether it's a sine wave difference, whether it's a hertz coming down, I can boot up my DG sets one by one and synchronize it. So what happens? I get 50 gigahertz. I can reduce a lot of redundancy, further bring down the cost. Today I have to keep 2x of every system just to handle that 100% uptime. If I just reduce by 1x, then not only my capex, it makes India much better to compete, right? And all of this is nothing but something out there of deep research, which as we get, so this is from electrical, similarly from mechanical, similarly from building, and similarly within that IT stack also. So as you help us, you will find India flourishing, and it's not only me. When I say I'm representing the whole 16 people of Indian data center lobby that is looking forward for such inputs and help. Because we can't hire the research guys. Our job is out there to run, and we'll put 2 more if that requires, because we have to get the workload to India. And our main fight is there, right? Our main fight is not in this. So this is could be a co-creation systems that you. This is the final slide. This is how we represent us worldwide. We calculate exactly how much carbon dioxide we have eliminated. We say how much water we have recycled. We give a target by when we are going to use recycled water. What is our running PUE? Where are we on renewable energy? And we have even ended up with experiments like putting 2 megawatt worth of solar panels around the building of data center, so that the heat thermal input is less. Second, for that thermal, I can generate, few watts of energy. So, any of this portion help and collaboration is deeply desired by the data center industry. So with that, I end. Thank you.